nother state. I'm trying to eat down a whole nother plate. Seem like my homies was stuck in the hood. I just told them be safe in the state.
Welcome to the Black Miss Podcast. Welcome to the Black Miss Podcast. I am your host, Too Black. I just recorded an intro, but my microphone broke, so we're going to do this again. I can't say that. Welcome to the Black Miss Podcast. Welcome to the Black Miss Podcast. I am your host, Too Black. All right. Today's episode, the myth is the anti-Obama race traitor. This was tough to figure out, like, precisely how to narrow down the myth, but effectively what we're saying is that criticisms of Obama does not make you a race traitor, whatever that even means in today's context. Similar to terms like pro-blackness and such, these are very abstract terms that are often just defined by whoever's saying it, and there's not much of a political ideology or general understanding of the politics that people are expressing. So it can be kind of nebulous at times. But what we're going to do in this episode is trace back to the time when Obama first gets in office. Or not even first gets in office, but first starts running for president. And really even prior to that, like the things leading up to it, then him actually running, him winning, and even being in office, and what the implications of this were, and how those who were critical, particularly those who were critical from the black left, not just people who were saying he wasn't black enough or he was a cornball, not that kind of stuff, but actually looking at his policies, looking at his cabinets, looking at his associations politically, even prior to him being in office, and being able to kind of read the tea leaves of where that was headed, and how this was not some black messiah. This was not somebody that was going to liberate us. But yet and still, if you were alive at that time, particularly if you were of voting age or older, and you were not, on that train, like, and you were vocal about it, you were going to receive some real criticism. And you were not just going to receive criticism, but you would be called a race traitor or some semblance of that. Like, you would be seen or treated in some way. And there were many who, at the time, or the few that did experience it, many of them also experienced further ostracization and marginalization due to, them taking a stand. So myself, to put me in this story a little bit, I was barely a voting age when Obama ran for president. Did not actually vote for him in 2008. That's a decision that's aged much better than it was at the time. um, but I was by one of my good friends at the time. They put me on the Black Agenda Report, so that put me on a different political trajectory than many of my peers. So no real credit to me, but to the people that helped point me in that direction. And that led to me having just seeing things differently, but often experience, the kind of side eyes and people looking at me like something was wrong with me because I didn't, buy into, this project. I don't really care about my own personal, mistreatment. That's not what this episode is about, but it's more broadly about if what it, not even about any real one individual, even though the individuals can help tell those stories, but more so about this idea that if you don't take a particular line, regardless of how well your argument is constructed and regardless of how well your argument is consistent with the reality that is happening, once people are pushed in a direction, that argument doesn't even it can't break a certain delusion that people had about Obama. Um, so we look at the world that we're in today, and I have some episodes coming up on this new Red Scare crunch that the State Department is on, and it's easy to say, "Oh, I miss the time when Obama was in office. I miss this time where it seemed like it was normal." But you have to be able to see that, part of how we got to what we're in today, politically is not a backlash necessarily to the Obama years, but in some ways a continuation and expansion and acceleration of it. even if certain components of that period are under attack. So today's episode, with that long introduction, is going to walk us through that history. It is going to be two OGs who were there to really witness these things within Black radical spaces, and even seeing how many Black radicals flipped. Because much of this episode was inspired by a speech that or not, it's not a speech, but a debate in 2008, the Great Harlem Debate. Then the debate was Obama good or bad for Black people, and there was different scholars, organizers, and activists who arrived to make a case one way or the other. Most of these arguments, if you go back and listen, did not age well. It was a lot of he's got a Black family, Black kids are going to be in the White House. There's going to be cookouts on the front lawn, kind of silliness. These were people who were supposed to be taken seriously, but these are some of the arguments they were making. And one of the arguments that stood out was Glenn Ford, who was the one of the co-founders of Black Agenda Report, and he makes a very clear case about the weaknesses and skepticism people should have of Obama, and why Obama was in line with many of the things that people said he was fighting against, capitalism, imperialism, racism, etc. But was damn near booed off stage. So today we're going to talk to people who were either literally at this debate or were just there at that time. So one y'all are very familiar with, and I'm Dr. Jared Ball. He is, been on the show many times. Is a scholar, professor at Morgan State University, author of the myth and propaganda of Black buying power, um, and the host of I Mix What I Like. And then also is Dr. Todd Steven Burroughs, and he does a great job of really walking us through the stories of this time period. He himself is a journalist, great historian, a novelist. He would even call himself a popular culture geek. He has published books such as Marvel's Black Panther, a comic book biography from Stan Lee, the Ta-Nehisi Coates, Warrior Princess, a people's biography of Ida B. Wells. And him and Dr. Ball were co-editors and also authors within the book, A Lie of Reinvention, correcting Manny Marable's Malcolm X. This was a response to the Manny Marable text on Malcolm X. So I'm going to link some of their former or some of the previous conversations in the chat and some writings that have already went over some things we'll discuss. But this was definitely a great discussion because it was just being able to go back over a history that I was very young during that time and able to see it more critically than maybe in some ways what I was experiencing at the time, but also having it put in context, to really see the game that was played on us with the whole Obama thing. Um, so maybe another time we do episodes getting more into the details of like those specific years. This is more of an overview. Like maybe we go over the healthcare fight, or how we never got single payer, or how Black Lives Matter somehow emerges at the same time as the Black president. There's many things to go over within those 8 years, or even the years prior, or somewhat after. But sometimes documenting history that you've actually lived through is harder than just reading the book, because you have to kind of step out of it and think about it beyond just the vantage point that you saw it from. Last point, then we'll get into the episode. This episode is going to be dropping on early on Patreon, and for those who are already on Patreon, you obviously figured this out. It's going to be dropping on the Black Myths Patreon, but also this one will be featured early on the Black Liberation Media Patreon. So on that note, if you want to keep getting these, because we're going to try to do this more often, please sign up. These will primarily be on the Black Myths Patreon, but there'll be some Black Liberation Media Patreon stuff as well. So sign up for either one of those. I do want to shout out, speaking of patrons, shout out Griffin. I want to shout out SRM. Want to shout out Nakia 485. Shout out to y'all who have signed up within the last month or so, and let's just keep getting those patrons coming in. Other than that, without further ado, let's get into the episode. Y'all enjoy. Thanks y'all for being here. Just to get right into it, is there such a thing as a race traitor? And if so, how do you define it? We need to just so we have clear terms of what we're talking about, since the myth is the anti-Obama race traitor.
Well, I don't know if the term is a good one, although I understand what you mean. I mean, and definitely the race trader idea, if we apply it to anything, we would apply it to this Obama phenomenon, right? I just want to point out that there have always been black contrarians,
Mm-hmm.
and many of our black leaders were black contrarians, like Marcus Garvey, etc. Right? And of course, in journalism, there's George Schuyler, who went from being like far left to being far right in terms of newspaper columnists. A lot of our black, I don't know what we would call them then, but now we would call them thought leaders, whether they were in music or whatever, uh, always had a strong strain of nationalism, but some were definitely more left than right. Um, Mary Baraka became a race traitor when he decided to become a black Marxist and disavowed all of black nationalism. So, and even Clarence Thomas claims, from his very right wing perspective, a black nationalism, right? So I think what you're really asking, and I know this is more of Dr. Ball's treehouse than mine, is to what degree black thought is manipulated and put into a funnel and funneled for purposes that may or may not be part of the black community, right? This Black Obama thing, went from being an idea to being a trend to being a reality, and anybody who stepped out of the orthodoxy got punished, right? So I think Trader does belong in this particular context only because of the way it was framed for the masses of the black community. Either you're for Obama or you're a traitor, which was the dialogue. So right. So I just wanted to kind of put that in context, and but it also shows the lack of political development, the lack of political imagination, and the idea that so much of what we are in terms of our public lives are a result of what whites have created for us to be in terms of funding, in terms of getting access to the establishment. So Obama is the sum total of that. We got to actually watch that peak, and that's what made it such a fascinating period.
I think that's wild. I from the time you sent the email to the time I've been even thinking about it today, I haven't considered the question from that perspective. I think Todd is right that 100%, once Obama was deposited on the scene, and particularly after that Iowa moment where black people believed he could actually win, it really did at least feel like, I can't say with empirical evidence or whatever how accurate this claim is, but it's definitely felt it, and it was my absolute experience that if you were not Team Obama, you were absolutely a race traitor. You were a traitor to the race. But I wasn't thinking of the question from that perspective. I was thinking of it in terms of, would Obama be defined as one, and how would you define one? Which I thought was
it's open ended for both, actually.
Yeah. No, I mean I think that's great. That and the differences and the different ways it could be interpreted is great. But so I was really struggling. I always struggle with how at what point do you define someone as an Uncle Tom or a traitor to the race or something like that. So as I've been considering it, for me, yes, there are any number of ways that I think black people here or anywhere in the African diaspora can respond with justification and legitimacy to the oppression that they face. I do think, however, that for me, it was clear that in Obama's case specifically, and I don't just mean because of his biraciality, although that was part of it, that what he did with his campaign was treacherous to the race, to Black people, that there was an absolute intent to concoct this mirage of affiliation, of extension, of a liberation struggle, of a freedom movement, of the culmination of that struggle, in fact, that was an absolute betrayal to that history, to those struggles, to the community, to the people themselves. So I would want to make, and I actually was just reminded, I didn't even remember this, but I was trying at one point even to briefly write about it in terms of this phrase of connected distance, that this idea that he was concocting this false connectivity that was absolutely distant from the community, but was done so well that it ended up being rebranded in a way that, as Todd started with, that if you weren't down with the program, you were the traitor. And it was so. Again, I'm very happy. I'm glad. Thank you for doing this, because I still feel traumatized by this era and very much triggered by this whole particular history. And I think to a point Todd either made before or after we got started here, that this history, I don't think, is being properly documented and or remembered, and the representation of it is often false. So,
and let's talk about how that, if we're going to go with the Obama being a traitor, it's a bit strong for me, but I understand what you're saying, Dr. Ball, and I'm not really disagreeing with you. I'm just thinking, okay, maybe I'm more on a 7 and you're on a 10 on this. But since we had the time, let's talk about how this got constructed, because where Dr. Ball is 300% correct is that it was a construction. So if you allow me like 5 minutes, I'll give my version of the construction, and I know Dr. Ball will have his own response to it.
Yeah, go for it, because that speaks to the next question.
The first person that constructed the Obama myth was Barack Obama. I remember discovering him in 1990 when the AP wrote an article about this first Black president of the Harvard Law Review. So I remember Obama very early on, right? Because that was his claim to fame. And as the documentaries and books will tell you, that, the first thing he did when he got to be the president of the Harvard Law Review was he went to the white right-wing people who were involved in the law review and made sure they had powerful positions. And his Black Harvard Law colleagues were very disappointed in him. You can see this in the documentaries. I'll try to, Dr. Ball knows I do a lot of stuff, so I'm going to try to
which documentary?
Attribute as many things as I can to what I'm trying to say.
Hold on, Todd. He's asking what documentaries, but before you even answer what documentaries you can find this in, you can find it, first and foremost, people need to find it in the interview that I did with Derek Bell, who was his Harvard law professor at the time, who says this, and who says in '08, he's not who people think he is. He's not who you think he is out here, because he knew this history. Yeah, right. Sorry. Yeah, right. Sorry. And that's no. I'm glad you jumped in. I'm sorry too, Black. I'm sorry I didn't hear what you were saying. I was busy yapping.
No, I was just saying, what's the he already has it. What's the
look at the PBS documentaries on Obama, and one of them will show this. But let's go back to this construction. So here comes Barry, as he was Barry, coming out of Hawaii, where he says he never met more than 10 Black people.
By way of Indonesia, too. Don't forget that.
right, that too. And Ta-Nehisi Coates, in his seminal article, "My President Was Black," he explains two things about Obama that he said we didn't understand. One was that Obama was an activist, not a protester. And two, that because he was not part of the mainland, he grew up with a loving white family that was his point of reference. And so that's why he could, now this is me talking, not Coates. That's why he could devote his one achievement, semi-affordable health care. He can point to his white mother and white grandmother for that, right?
Right.
Because that's his point of reference. So let's go. So Barry comes to the mainland. He's Barry until he sees he can get some ass if he uses his African name, and so then he becomes Barack for that reason. All right.
And please be clear. I know Todd said it a certain way, but that's what he says.
Yeah. I'm only going to talk about what he says and what. This is why Dr. Ball wanted to drag me in here on this, because he knows I've read Obama. I'm only going to mention anything. Only thing I want to mention is what he says and what others have said about him, and I'm going to mark my own opinions as my own. But we've got to take some time and create this construction, because this construction did not happen overnight. Okay. So Barry comes to the mainland. He becomes Barack, for personal purposes, right? And then he's looking for a direction. He's looking for an identity, as young people do, right? Okay. He gets to the law school and, like I said, decides to play ball with the white structure and power, which is his thing, right? Now, because of the Harvard Law Review, he gets offered a book contract, which, if you go and look at the history of that, is not unusual, actually. There's few people that, when they get to these kind of prestigious positions, get offered a book contract. The white guy right now, the young white guy right now, who's about to get a 7-figure film deal, because he's got the new Social Network, the guy who wrote about Stanford, he's 22 years old. He got a book contract. He was writing his book while he was finishing at Stanford. He literally just graduated a month ago, and he's had a 7-figure movie contract waiting for him, because he wrote about these elite whites and how Stanford is sold out, quote unquote, to Silicon Valley, right? So this kind of elite,
got that Peter Thiel connection now too,
right? So this kind of elite thing is not unusual, right? Okay, so he gets a book contract. Now, he doesn't know what he wants to write about, and so he talks to his white friends about what to write. He didn't talk to his black friends about what to write. He talks to his white friends what to write about, and they go back and forth. And his white friend says, "You should write about your life." Now,
this is Obama. We're back to Obama.
Okay, this is Obama. Okay, so Obama then reads the entire African American literary experience. He reads Baldwin. He reads Richard Wright. He reads all of that. He reads Maya Angelou. He reads all of that. He reads Alex Haley. He reads all of this, and then he constructs a book that connects all of those dots. So if you're a reader, you can read it and go, "Oh, he's read Baldwin here. Oh, he's read Richard Wright here." Because he's not saying he's read it, but you can tell in the structure he's read it. So when he ends in Africa with the crying in Africa, that's stolen from what? It's stolen from Ruth, and it's stolen from Maya Angelou when she talked about being at that bridge, in her Africa book, right? Where she's an Africanist. She talks about being that bridge and seeing the crying ancestors and all of that. So he structures an entire book based on his African connection and the Black dilemma, completely based on his white friends and white advisors. Okay, so now,
this is Dreams of My Father.
This is Dreams of My Father. Okay. Now, we know about that he went into the Black community in Chicago for 3 years. Let's talk 1 minute about that. Dr. Ball is an Ivy League graduate, so he understands this culture very well. There are people, when they go to law school, particularly when they go to a prestigious law school, they take a year or 2 or 3, and they do what? They do the most grassroots community work they can find, because they want to prove to people that they're going to be worthy of the privileges and advantages they're about to get. And when people challenge them, they want to say, "Oh, I worked in a homeless shelter. I did this. I did that." So that's an Ivy trick, right? That's an Ivy trick. And so he goes and does these 3 years, and he even documents in Dreams of My Father. One of the black people who he's friends with says, "You're gonna leave us in a couple of years and go to law school, go over to white people." He knows it. And Obama, to his credit, documents that. And yes, he does the 2 to 3 years, the community organizing, right? And then he pivots to law school. And then he reads everything. He reads Fanon. He goes to a Stokely Carmichael speech. This is what he writes about. He reads everything. But what is he trying to do? Well, the way Martin Luther King was trying to read to get an answer as to how to get out of segregation, right? And Martin Luther King found, the social gospel and found these things that he was able to synthesize into, we can take Gandhi's method, we can do this, we can do that, and we can make it in the black church, and then we can do things that people have already done before, but we can do it this dramatic way, and we can have this social gospel, the philosophy, and we can use that to feed the people so that people can believe we're going to get free, and so the way King did all of that, and then he comes out of that ready to practice being Martin Luther King, which took practice, as we know, right? He didn't win every time, right? Obama reads everything with the idea of, I'm going to be the future of Black America. I want to get Black America out of the paradigm of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all of that stuff that we just holding on to that doesn't do anything for us. I'm going to get us out of that. And the way I'm going to get us out of that is I'm going to absorb it. And then I'm going to go a step further, and I'm going to speak in code so that the black people understand that I've absorbed it, but that the white people get that I'm also for them, that I'm at least equally for them, because we've got to all advance and the white people have the power. Now, this is when Obama learns how to drop his G's when he speaks to black people. Right? Coates talks about this. He writes about this. He drops his G's, right? And this is when he's trying to hook onto a political philosophy. Now, he runs for Congress, and the Black Panther from Chicago,
Bobby Rush.
Thank you. Bobby Rush kicks his ass.
Yep.
Right? And because the people of Chicago are like, look, like we got Bobby Rush and we got you. We don't even know who you are. We don't know how to pronounce your name. We don't know who you are. You're not one of us, right? And so his loss, that's when the advisors come in. David Axelrod and the folks that, he surrounds himself. That's when they come in. And they come in and say, we've got to market you so that the black community sees one thing and the white community sees another. And they literally create a narrative of his life that he can then produce. So in the black community, on black radio, you're hearing this, and the white community, white radio, you're hearing this, right? Now, I want to say something very provocative here that I know Dr. Ball is going to have a response to. The black community had already been prepped for this kind of movement. So Obama was able to just take an already invisible template and use it to get black support to the White House. Now, what do I mean? Well, back in 1990, when Obama was head of the Law Review, there was an amazing tour that an African leader made in America named Nelson Mandela, in which, Nelson Mandela was marketed to people as, okay, this is going to be the future of a democratic, liberal South Africa. He's not a Pan-Africanist. He's not a Marxist. He's not any of those things you're scared of. And Obama's playing this game, right, because he wants to be president, right? And so he does this tour in America where he stops in New York. He smacks Ted Koppel up and down on television, which people have never forgotten. He goes to Atlanta, talks about, Martin Luther King and all this thing. So there's this idea that, okay, we can go beyond Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, because and Nelson Mandela proves it. And Nelson Mandela coming from the way he did, making major compromises that he made, that he writes about, right? Um, that becomes a template idea that, oh, maybe we can get out of this 60s thing that we're stuck in, this radical 60s thing that we're stuck in. Maybe we can get out of it and move on. So when Obama comes on the scene and gets marketed correctly, the same way they marketed Mandela, by the way, because I remember the marketing Mandela, keep the pressure on and all that for sanctions and all of that. No discussion about revolution, no discussion about Pan-Africanism, no discussion about the left. Just keep the pressure on for sanctions. Sanctions were the approved a push against the South African government, right? Apartheid government. Obama's marketed the same way, right? And again, this is more Dr. Ball's thing than mine, so I know he'll have a better analysis than I am. But I just want to give you how all of these things are placed together. Now, what else happened? What else happened while Obama goes from being a Congress failure to being president? What happens is we get 2 black secretaries of state. We get black people who head Fortune 500 companies. We get people getting used to having black governors, people getting used to having black leaders in everything. In sports, we get black tennis stars. We get all the things that Dr. Cress Wilson used to say, the small balls, right? we were being fed the big balls, and they had the small balls. Well, we were dominating the small balls too, right? So, and we were becoming, television anchors and television superstars like Oprah Winfrey and all of this. So this idea of black people being able to lead America and being able to stand for quote unquote all of America, translation, I will visibly be black, I will symbolically be black, but I will follow the white agenda. This is all being set up. And again, media has a I guess I don't want to put words in Dr. Ball's mouth, but if I were doing an invitation, I would say media had a sinister role in this. Because I never forgot when John Ridley, the guy who created Undercover Brother, and he's done some other things in Hollywood. I never forgot when he wrote an article for, I don't know, was it Esquire, one of these major articles, where he talked about Black Power and that we are now the pinnacle of Black Power. And what was the topic of the article? The topic of the article was that when George W. Bush had to go get an operation for about 12 hours, Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell were in charge of the United States.
Oh my God.
And he thought that was a big deal. I mean, I laughed at that, but I'm thinking, okay, he's John Ridley. He's writing for a major magazine. He's getting paid $20,000 to say this. So what is he going to say? He's not going to quote, Marcus Garvey or George Jackson or Mobile Abdul-Jabbar or Duruful Hadi. He's going to do that, right? And so Ta-Nehisi Coates, ironically, now this is where it gets really weird. Ta-Nehisi Coates, and I got a 2-hour conversation with Dr. Ball on Ta-Nehisi Coates that you should check out. But Ta-Nehisi Coates is brought in because the whites in these elite media structure realize they don't have an authentic black to talk about this stuff. And so Ta-Nehisi Coates has been auditioning for them for 15 years, dropping out of Howard and going to magazines and going up the ladder, keep getting laid off. He keeps going up the ladder. When he gets laid off at better jobs. So by the time Obama comes out, Ta-Nehisi Coates has been now lobbying and auditioning for 15 years to be the one to explain this kind of thing. So they choose him. And that's how we get Ta-Nehisi Coates. And as I said to Dr. Ball in our 2-hour, what I call my Cat Williams discussion with him about Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, The Message, as I mentioned to Dr. Ball on that program, Ta-Nehisi Coates replaces a black woman who they had chosen, Deborah Dickerson, who they kick out of the elite structure because she wrote an article saying Obama was not black enough, meaning that he wouldn't represent the black community. And by the way, Cornel West was making these criticisms very early on. I remember an early episode of the Tavis Smiley Show back in 2006, 2007, where Cornel West was saying, I don't know about this brother. Right? I don't know. What does he really represent? Who does he really represent?
Because nobody knew who he was.
Right. So Obama gets fed to not only the white progressives as the next one, but he gets fed to the black community as this is the future of the entire African American experience. Obama understands that. So he drops his half white, half Asian girlfriend, picks up Michelle. Oh, and then he decides to go to this Afrocentric church. And all of this happens at the same time.
Yep. Reverend Wright. Yeah.
Reverend Wright. So Obama has been getting ready for something that he's been getting ready for since he was 30 years old and president of Harvard Law Review. He just didn't have the direction. But once he got the direction from Axelrod and his other folks, and once he decided to absorb the African American experience where he could talk about it symbolically, he then had the model. And I'll give you an example of what I mean, and I'll let Dr. Ball talk, because this was longer than I should have gone. And thank you, Dr. Ball, for letting me go this long. I appreciate it. When he would win those early primaries, right, up against Hillary and folks. Now remember, he's already picked hope, right? Hope is the theme, right?
Mhm.
The audacity of hope.
Yeah,
right?
I remember all that. Yeah, I
Right.
remember
Which
the
allows you
blue and red picture. Yeah, I remember all that. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, the poster, that was a big deal when I was on college campus. That poster of hope with that blue and red kind of poster was on it was almost like graffiti. People would just post it anywhere on campus. But go ahead. I'm just remembering those days.
No, and it's a good remembering, because the adding audacity to that implies, I'm not a psychologist, but it implies standing up, struggle, taking a position, right? So his wording, I mean, the man is a wordsmith, right? He's a brilliant writer, right, in terms of Dreams of My Father. So he's setting up where he's giving all these codes. So if you go back to those speeches, go back to those primary victory speeches. Here's what he said. He says something like this. He says, what we have is hope, the audacity of hope. America is part of hope. It's the same hope that the slaves had when they gathered around the fire. He would always say that first. Mm-hmm. And then he would pivot to the Union Hall and all that, and then go up and up and up.
It was a creed written into the founding documents that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed the trail toward freedom. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
It was sung.
It was sung by immigrants as they struck out to distant shores, pioneers who pushed westward against unforgiving wilderness. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
It was the call of workers organized, women who reached for the ballots, a president who chose the moon as our new frontier, and a king who took us to the mountaintop.
So, like, he knows what to hit to get a certain person, a certain group on board. That's why he starts with us, and he makes sure that he makes that connection. And he's going, I'm not only the continuation of Martin Luther King and all that, I'm the continuation of slavery. I'm the continuation of the entire thing. You vote for me, you take a walk through the entire thing, and you end up with me. And this is the kind of thing that they mastered in 2008. And so that's why, when Obama does his famous race speech, which, is one of the greatest compromise speeches I've ever heard, but some people love this speech, right? When he does a race, and by the way, his white advisors are against it. They're like, please don't do that. Please don't do that. You'll mess up the whole thing if you become the black candidate. But Obama, at this point, has mastered the art of coding to black people, I see you. I know you. And then coding to white people, but you will never be uncomfortable with me ever. I have a white mother, I have a white grandmother, and they're my frame of reference. And then Obama shows up with his very black-looking wife and his very black children. Right? So all the coding, all the symbolism is there. And all of the preparation, all the struggles to get black people in Congress, all of the struggles to get black people in offices and mayorships and all that that's been happening for 30, 40, 50 years, culminates in this one moment. Culminates. And we've gotten mayors now, we've gotten governors, now we're going to do this. And the idea that the Obamas perpetuate is okay, what do we do with all of this history? What do we do with all this history that we have as black people? Well, let's just absorb it, and now let's just be Americans.
Mm.
And we'll be Americans in the White House, and we're Americans with a certain background, and we're Americans. And that's the whole thing. That's how the whole thing happened. And so we got into this new quandary of, okay, now what do we do? And then the civil rights leaders sold out and all that. But we'll get to that after Dr. Ball talks. Because I got a call from one of those leaders the day they went up there to compromise, right? So I'll get into all of that after Dr. Ball gives his version.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dr. Ball. Thank you again. That was a great history, and that's exactly what I wanted people to hear. Because we only got remnants of it. Dr. Ball.
Yeah, I just want to fill in a couple of there's a couple things that I would want to respond to and fill in maybe a gap or two. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, the when I made the point about his biraciality, and then even made the joke about the Indonesia and Hawaii and all of this, it's not to suggest that that someone of that experience could not have had some form of a black experience, and it's not to suggest that should at all disqualify someone for wanting to engage black communities in struggle. But it was to point out, and it's certainly not to be confused with the reactionary confused backwards hashtags.
Yeah,
it's just simply to point out the specific way that I think it's clear, and not only in the way Dr. Burroughs laid out some of the history there, but if people do, and I encourage people to please go read his books. If you really want to see, and go read that David Garrow book that Todd and I also did a review of a couple years ago. It's pretty clear that he has been very well aware of the way race has been socially constructed and the way that he could use it for his benefit. And this is something where I would want to just disagree slightly with what Dr. Burroughs was just saying. That in the note I wrote here was that unlike what I think Dr. Burroughs was saying about the comparison to Dr. King, and Dr. King using his experience in wanting to study to learn how he would free black people, Barry was far more selfish and took the path he knew that he could take to get where he wants to be today. So, which is very rich, very elite, very able to inform and to be seen as informing a history and a struggle and a set of politics, but in a very narrow and carefully constructed way.
And very beloved.
Oh, absolutely.
I think he really wants that too.
Oh, absolutely. And that's exactly what I was just going to say, because I am in part triggered by this because of the overlap with my own personal experience. Despite Dr. Burroughs' joke about my Ivy League experience, I think he does point to something that speaks to why I am very much wanting to be part of these kinds of conversations, and why I was so hostile to the whole rise of Obama in the first place. So I wrote here that I've seen what he saw, but in a different way because of the important differences of looks and talent. Like, he can never be as good looking as me, but I could never be as talented and skilled as what he has done. Like he has an incredible skill and performative ability.
Yeah,
he is no dummy.
Nah, he really
is
does.
sharp as they get.
Yeah.
But the difference is that he had, depending on how you read certain and how you interpret it, he had a very much more state and elite driven association, not only to whiteness through his mother and her state adjacent jobs and histories and politics, whereas where I was raised in a very much more radical version of that. And that I was raised here and around way more black people and connected differently to black working class and civil and human rights struggles. So that informed me very differently. So when I did get those invitations to whiteness and invitations to the space that he would ultimately occupy, I did have those opportunities, but my reaction, looking back and able to say it differently, was to reject it. Now, part of it was I was not as talented and not as capable of doing what he has been able to do. But another part of it was I did not want it. So by the time my Ivy League experience was at the Africana Studies and Research Center under the founding director, the late great Dr. James Turner, whereas he was at Harvard Law School doing a very different politics and engagement, not only with his own identity and wanting to engage and be around and assume and be part of a Black community, but to do it in a very certain way. So I just wanted to, and this is why when, for instance, as Dr. Burroughs points out with the race speech, he can point out and if folks go back and look at, first of all, he throws the Palestinians under the bus in that speech. So that was something that I remember was very important about that speech. And he used that speech. And the reason he was smart enough to go against whatever white advisors were trying to get him to not do it was because he could take the study that Todd was talking about. He could study all of this Black world, and then he could make reference to it without specifically citing it in ways he knew Black people would pick up. So he would constantly he would refer to King as that preacher in Atlanta instead of talking about Dr. King, or he would make some sort of reference to the dream deferred without saying anything about Langston Hughes or finishing any of the rest of the quote. Like, he did that shit all of the time. It was really, really beautifully done, but infuriating if you saw what was happening.
Yeah.
And then in that race speech, when he's talking about the loving white family, he also specifically uses the racism of his white grandmother,
Right.
Yep.
Forgot about that.
to reconnect. So he throws his grandmother under the bus.
Right. I forgot about that.
I can no more disown him than I can disown the Black community. I can no more disown him than I can disown my white grandmother, a woman who helped raise me, a woman who sacrificed again and again for me, a woman who loves me as much as she loves anything in this world, but a woman who once confessed her fear of Black men who passed her by on the street, and who on more than one occasion has uttered racial or ethnic stereotypes that made me cringe.
So he's saying to white folks, I'm with you, sort of. Black people, I'm with you, sort of. But I'm willing to throw all of you, including my grandmother, under any bus that's out there. That's how I remember taking that speech. And I do just want to quick. Yeah, go ahead.
Didn't he compare? I'm going to edit all that in once this is done. But didn't he compare like his racist grandparents to like bitter Black people or something like that?
The church contains in full the kindness and cruelty, the fierce intelligence and the shocking ignorance, the struggles and successes, the love, and yes, the bitterness and biases that make up the Black experience in America. And this helps explain, perhaps, my relationship with Reverend Wright. As imperfect as he may be, he has been like family to me.
That part I can't say. I don't remember.
I remember something like that.
I know Michelle Obama did that in her bio.
You might have something like that. And you know what? I wanted to jump in just for 30 seconds. Michelle Obama's first bio, her first memoir, she claims the African-American experience and even more the radical experience, but does it in a way that is so super slick because she has two white writers. She has two white women writers, getting paid six figures to write her memoir, right? So when she talks about racism and all of that, no, I'm sorry. There's two examples I want to do real quick. One, she spends a whole high school year with one of Jesse's daughters. And instead of talking about the politics of Jesse Jackson and running for president and all of that, she talks about, that was me and my friend dealing with her father's a celebrity. So she destroys and squashes all of the 84 stuff that was going on and all that because she doesn't want to deal with it, 84 and 88, right? And then when she goes to Princeton, it's right after Princeton has the protest, and she talks about, she quotes the badly misnamed or unfortunately misnamed Third World Center. And she becomes best friends with the head of that center. And she even throws in a quick question about apartheid or whatever they used to talk about or whatever. But she frames all of that as, I had an older mentor to help me through the ropes at Princeton. Right? So we don't even know who the real Michelle Obama is. We know she's corporate. She claims that. And she also claims that it was Barack that got her to start thinking about society. Right?
She's the black bourgeoisie.
Right.
Yeah.
So all these memoirs line up, and they're trying to be slick, but anybody who has some reading ability can see what they're trying to do. They're doing all these codes. I just wanted to drop that in. Go.
All right, let me just do a couple quick more things real quick, and then I'll be done. So I just wanted to point that out that Obama did all of this with intention, and if you go, and I often cite it, and I should go back and find it myself. I think it was a New Yorker piece where Rahm Emanuel, who was at the time his chief of staff, outlined their media strategy, and if you connect that and some other things, including all of these memoirs, with what is being said here, it becomes very clear that what we got dropped on us in '08 was the culmination of a very meticulously planned life, media strategy, presentation, all designed to make these references to blackness, but in ways that, as Eleanor Clift said on the McLaughlin Group, would not scare white people because he did not have this, she said, the baggage of slavery. So like that was their way of, so like he was very clear what he was doing. And then the very last piece I want to put on, because this was another thing that was really triggering for me at the time, is that the hip hop literati, the black bourgeoisie of the time, writing about hip hop and hip hop studies and hip hop activism and all this, was saying literally, because of hip hop's ability and the browning of America, that it was hip hop that paved the way for Barack Obama. And God damn it.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Is that still to this day infuriating, as they reran that argument at the 50th anniversary, and ignored all of the criticism, all of the radicalism within the movement, and all of the political differences within all of that, and created this narrative that he himself happily attached himself to. And that's why when you had, not that I'm a fan, but when they performed at his inauguration, even the Black Eyed Peas and Kendrick, I believe, maybe this was another one, are edited. I know the Black Eyed Peas edited out their verse so that the reference to the CIA and the song that they initially had dropped that was used at his inauguration would not be included. So it was a perfect, I think, symbolism of how that they would be considered hip hop, but then that even they had to censor themselves for his hip hop. And there's a little piece of journalism out there for anybody who really wants to, I think, with Free Speech TV, just more personal hate, that I was dubbed the first hip hop president before Barack Obama, because my Green Party nomination campaign started before his Democratic Party campaign, primary campaign, and Free Speech TV dubbed me the first hip hop candidate. So he stole everything.
Please find that.
I remember that because I think you were on like Davey D or something. I was paying attention to these things back then. I remember Lupe in 2012. I think you wrote about this, Dr. Ball. He performed at the inauguration and did try to bring up Palestine or something, and that was pretty much the end for him, like in terms of his career. Like,
if I wrote about that, I don't remember, but somebody should have made that point. Yeah,
I don't know if you wrote about that issue, but you wrote about Lupe and hip hop. You wrote also about this is in Black Agenda Report, about he wasn't really the most. I think you said something like, if this is the farthest left in hip hop, then we're missing something as well. But like,
oh yeah, definitely.
But
and if we're going to talk about hip hop, I just want to mention that, of course, at one of these, either inauguration or one of these early Obama entertainment fests, there was a young guy who got up and performed this rap, and Obama loved it. Everybody loved it.
You need to know, I'll be playing Vice President Aaron Burr, and snap along if you like. How does a bastard orphan son of a whore and a Scotsman dropped in the middle of a forgotten spot in the Caribbean by providence, impoverished in squalor, grow up to be a hero and a scholar. The $10 founding father without a father got a lot farther by working a lot harder, by being a lot smarter, by being a self-starter. By 14 they had placed him in charge of the trade and charter, and every day while slaves were being slaughtered or carted away across the waves, our Hamilton kept his guard up. Inside he was longing for something to be a part of. The brother was ready to beg, steal, borrow, or barter.
And that was Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Oh wow, perfect.
Yeah, and what was that? That was the song about Alexander Hamilton. And because of the success of that, he then goes off with his writing team and creates a whole.
See,
You know,
I didn't even know he was responsible for that too.
see what I'm saying? The nightmare never ends.
Now, let me point out a couple of things just to show you that everybody was not thinking in lockstep. You know who was real smart about this, who understood this dynamic and wrote about it? David Remnick. If you go to David Remnick's book on Obama, he says Obama has nothing to do with the Black Power movement. And that's because David Remnick actually read and studied the Black Power movement, right? But there's another David Remnick story I want to tell that's important. Remnick tried to ask him something about race. And if you remember, you know, Barack Obama would go into this word salad whenever somebody would ask him about race, right? Now, Obama loves these white intellectual people. He loves people like Remnick and all these people, right? So he knows when he's bullshitting them, and he knows that they can tell he's bullshitting them, right? So Obama tried to do this word salad with Remnick. Remnick closes his notebook and says, "Okay, thank you, Mr. President." He starts walking away. Remnick says Obama follows him and says, wait, David, wait. I know what you want me to say, but I can't be like Martin.
Mm. Mm. And this is in, what was this book called?
I forgot what David Remnick's book is called, and I don't know whether that, I forget where I got that analogy from, that anecdote from, but David Remnick did a great book on Obama where he said Barack Obama has nothing to do with the Black Power movement.
And Garrow's book said something. I mean, because I didn't read.
I started talking about Garrow's book. I'm glad you brought up Garrow's book. Go ahead, keep going with Garrow's book.
Well, I don't remember enough of it. I need to go back and look at it because Garrow's book was Rising Star, and I did read that one. Remnick's book was The Life and Rise of Barack Obama, the Bridge.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The Bridge, and I didn't read that one, but I've read a number of Remnick interviews and Remnick was very, and I want to say Remnick had at one point said something about that Obama had crafted his basketball game or his handshake or his walk, like he was doing really
the box.
Because I do remember it is sillily anecdotal, but I do remember when my godfather said he knew he could tell Barack Obama did not hang around black people just by the way he shot the basketball. Like the way he's if you just look at the way he shoots, it may go in, but you could just tell he's not been around any black people. And I was just like, wow, that's wild. But then I remember Remnick saying something about Obama's. He's worked on some aspect of that kind of his life,
right? In
the way that you said he would drop the G's around black people or something like that. It's.
And by the way, if you want links, I wrote a book review on David Garrow's book, and it's for Atlanta Black Star, and it's called "How Barack Obama Learned the Wrong Things from Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement." So if you want a link that discusses Garrow's book in detail, it does, because Garrow exposes him. Garrow exposes him and says this is a guy that maybe went in with the right intentions. But once he saw that he could get power, he was like everybody else. And so it didn't matter he was black, didn't matter he studied the civil rights movement. None of that mattered. What mattered was the road he was on. And they went up the road he was on. And by the way, I mean, again, I'm not throwing Michelle under the bus, but I do want to point out that in one of these books, because, Michelle was tired of this guy at this point. She was ready to divorce him when he was a state legislator because she was like, I didn't get married to raise these kids by myself. And people point out that they didn't eat dinner together every night as a family until he got into the White House. That was the first time they ate dinner together in like 13 years, something like that, every night. So Michelle tells him with the Senate thing, okay, if you don't make this, that's it, right? So he makes the Senate. So now everybody's afraid, Obama's team are afraid to go to Michelle, right? To talk about running for president, right? And so they go to Michelle, and Michelle asks 2 questions. She asked, will he be available on weekends for the kids and the family? And they said no. But the second question, this is where her Princeton comes out. The second question is asked is, can he win? And they said yes. And she was on board. It took some grooming, because she was speaking like a black woman at first. They cut that out.
I remember.
Started giving her some scripts and some coaching. Because I never forgot when she said early on, she was like, Hillary Clinton, she needs to get her family together. They quickly scrubbed that stuff.
She said, how are you gonna run the White House if you can't run your own house?
One of the important aspects of this race is role modeling what good families should look like. And my view is that if you can't run your own house, you certainly can't run the White House. Can't do it.
See, I knew I wasn't the only person that saw that.
Yeah.
But they quickly grabbed her and scrubbed her and showed her how to behave and all of that. They did that real quick. So, but I said all the stuff I said, rambling as it was, and I'm sorry about that. But I'm trying to point out that if we go with this idea of him being a traitor, right? We have to go with it from an emotional point of view. And in terms of the Black emotion, everything from 1970 through Mandela, through hip hop, was being used at this particular moment to accept this particular reality. So, for instance, we couldn't bring up that in 2004, that was a speech in which white people discovered him and then started the ascent, right? When he did the speech at Kerry's convention, and he said there is no Black America, there is no white America, there's the United States of America, right?
There is not a Black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America.
Which goes against like decades and decades of Black thought, right? If you go by Delaney, hundreds of years of Black thought, right? But there are certain things we would just accept because we were said, okay, this is the future. This is the future step, right? The Nation of Islam was quiet when he had to go and denounce Minister Farrakhan on the campaign trail or in debates in 2008.
I remember that. I actually went to the Savior's Day in 2007. I'm not Muslim, even though everybody thinks I am, but like I went to Savior's Day in 2007, and I remember Farrakhan spoke kindly of him, and then the press ran with it and said that was an endorsement. Right? I remember.
And so Farrakhan spoke quietly, kindly of him because he had connections with the minister that nobody wanted to reveal. And, Dr. Jared Ball's colleague, Askia Muhammad from WPFW, had a photo that had he chosen to release it at any other time other than the time he released it, which was when he published his own memoir just about 5 years ago or so, or whatever, a picture of a smiling Obama and a smiling Farrakhan, we would not have had President Obama.
Man, shout out to the late great Askia Muhammad. That is, I continue to forget about that point. That is a really good point. Askia, man, you could rebrand the headline and say Askia Muhammad is responsible for Obama's presidency, and anyway, that's a whole other conversation because I've always anyway. I'm gonna leave it. I'll just leave it there. But while we disagreed on that point in terms of the value of that, Askia, I think that's deep. He did him a solid on that for sure. That's wow.
Yeah, I'm looking at the picture now.
So the traitor tag, if you want to go with that, is an emotional response. Right?
Well, I mean, what would it require for someone to be a traitor? Like, what are the what would the
independent thinking, independent thought, independent analysis, and a critical analysis.
Part of it with what we were going for with this myth was that one, it's because it's ambiguous, you can project it in different directions. So you can, and so a question I did have was how so often a Glenn Ford could go on, I guess saying a Glenn Ford could go on stage, using him as a stand-in for other similar kinds of arguments, and they can make a case about him that really doesn't even matter if he's black. In some ways, they're making a very policy-based argument about him, and then how that affects black people as a mass. Often that criticism will get conflated with somebody hating black people or trying to say he's not black enough. And so the race traitor thing gets blended together. So even Glenn Ford says in that debate, we were often, crafted as race traitors, so like, how did y'all notice those things getting merged together where, there's the old kind of like, this dude's not black, he grew up with white people,
but see,
and then the very like policy systemic critique, those things got merged together. So it didn't matter whether you said one or the other.
But
you were
see,
just
the
a race
question
traitor.
assumes, though, that in terms of black political development, that ever since the Black Power movement faded, that there were discussions about policy. Policy peaked, and Dr. Ball will, debate me if he feels I'm wrong on this. Policy peaked with Gary. Policy peaked with the writing of the Gary document and the attempt of the National Black Political Assembly, right? But it was the very emphasis on policy that no longer worked, because once black politicians stepped into the arena, they were beholden to white policymakers. And so the idea then was, well, the more we are in office, the more we can get things done. And an example that's used, for instance, is the only accomplishment the Congressional Black Caucus really has ever had, which is they were part of the Democratic wing and the left wing that were pushing for sanctions for South Africa. But pushing for sanctions for South Africa was a Democratic-approved concept, right? So there was no risk that these black politicians took in the 80s by saying, I'm against apartheid South Africa. Who was for apartheid South Africa other than the Republican Party? And they were for it, as they said, for Cold War reasons. See, they actually had a policy argument, right?
Right.
We're with it for Cold War reasons. We're with it because when the Russians start World War III, we know these white South Africans who have the nuclear bomb will have our back as Americans, right?
Right.
So you see now Jesse, here's where it gets a bit complicated. Jesse tried very hard to push for policy. In the book that the sister wrote, Abby Phillip, who wrote a book on Jesse Jackson, Abby Phillip from CNN, she writes that Jesse's policies were so strong, they're to the left of Bernie Sanders' policies today.
Yeah.
Right? But what got caught up with Jesse? Well, as many people have explained, and Mary Baraka did very well in a great essay called Jesse Jackson and Black People, which you can find online, the Democratic establishment got to him, meaning that they offered him some things that he took. And one of them was to put his son, Jesse Jackson Jr., on the Democratic National Committee. As a result of that push, they changed the rules in terms of proportionate of delegates, and that's how Obama gets elected. That's why you get this whole thing of Jesse walked because Obama could run, right? Because what Jesse got was he got to change the rules of the Democratic Party that allowed Barack Obama to win the primaries. Now, if you are a liberal, that's enough for you, right? Ta-Nehisi Coates writes in a recent essay about Kamala Harris, one of the things he points out is that the Democratic leadership women were able to get some concessions from the Democratic Party, and the price of that, Coates says, is to ignore Palestine.
Yep. And that's right. Obvious with all of the acolytes on that train. Right. Yeah.
So when you get these crumbs from the Democrats, policy goes out the window because now you've got a crumb, you got something to show. And that's why, when Obama gets elected, the black leadership, particularly the black protest leadership, is like, well, Sharpton openly says, I don't know if I can protest a black president.
No. Don't do him any favors. It was way more affirmative than that.
Well,
I
when I
remember.
saw the quote, it was a question mark. It might have become an exclamation point. But
Okay.
I got you, though. I got you.
No, you're probably right. I probably put an exclamation point on it. Because in my mind, he was saying, I'm not protesting.
No, but let me get to where you are right, though. Let me get where you're 300% right. Let me get there in a second. Listen, so, now, Too Black, I want you to understand the symbolism of this. Listen to this. Obama gets in office, right? Now, we've been told by all these black leaders, and by the way, I voted for Obama twice because I believe the Mary Baraka when he said that we can't ask him for anything if he doesn't get in office. If he gets in office, we can do a black bloc, a black left bloc, and make demands for him. This is what Baraka said. I love Baraka. I'm from Newark. I believed him.
That never happened.
Well, let's talk about why it didn't happen.
And of course, it was never going to. All right, go ahead.
No. I'm going to prove your point right now, Dr. Ball Holder. I'm going to get there for you. We're get there for you. So I want you to listen, right? So, and of course, Obama himself said, quoting Roosevelt, make me do it, right? But we'll get to that in a minute. Why that didn't happen. So the symbolism cannot be forgotten that Obama's first meeting as president with the civil rights leaders is in one of the worst snowstorms in Washington, D.C.'s history. So they go up literally covered in white. Okay. Almost secretly. Nobody's covering Capitol Hill. Everybody's home, right? Everybody's going to White House. Everybody's home. Probably only the pool reporters are there. We don't even know who's there, right? So they go covered in white.
Just for the time period, this is before he's elected or after he's elected?
This is right after he's elected. This is like 2009. He's in office.
Okay.
First meeting as president with civil rights leaders. So they go in. Now I'm thinking, okay, this is what Mary Baraka was talking about. Okay, they're gonna go in there with a list of stuff, and we're gonna fight this out. And if he doesn't do right, the civil rights leaders are gonna come out. And they're gonna say, he said fight with him, so we gotta fight with him, right? We gotta be Eleanor Roosevelt pushing Franklin, right? Okay, this is what I'm thinking, right? Because I'm an optimist back then. Okay. So they come out and do a press conference in the snowstorm. And they say that the black agenda, a black agenda we've been doing over and over again. I mean, if you want to go back to Lerone Bennett's Shaping of Black America, a black agenda we've been crafting since the 1800s in conventions, right? That we go all the way up through Gary, through all of that, all the way up to what other people do, splinter groups and all that, right? The whole black agenda, right? So this concept we've been holding on to since slavery, or at least since Reconstruction, having a black agenda. They come out and they say the black agenda is supporting Barack Obama.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
There were no conditions on the support. There was nothing on it. And one of these leaders called me and I said, how could you go to see the president and not ask him something? And then he went into this long explanation that, went over my head. He started quoting Frederick Douglass and something like that. I don't know. Some Frederick Douglass quote I'd never heard of or whatever. But the reality was, to go into Glenn Ford's analysis, first of all, you have a compromised leadership class that's dependent on grants, right? Mark Morial's salary is reportedly like $1 million a year. The guy in Newark who just left our social justice group, who did a very cowardly reparations report, his reward for that is now he's getting $500,000 a year as the new head of the Southern Poverty Law Center, right? These folks are funded incredibly well by white, whatever you want to call them, progressives, moderates, whatever you want to call them, right? So they can't really speak out. So they're already compromised. And then they decide, okay, if we go against Obama, then our people, our constituents, people who stood in line for 8 hours, you remember that in 2008, people were coming with oxygen tanks, right? It was going to be the last thing they were going to do on this earth was going to vote for Barack Obama, right? That those people would turn on them. And that was a complaint whenever somebody came up to a black politician and said, Barack Obama did this, why are you not criticizing him? That would be their answer. My constituency would turn on me. And so we get that, and then to start the media thing, because I know Dr. Ball will do a much better job than I will on this, the entire black media apparatus decides that the black agenda is Barack Obama. Tom Joyner broadcasting live from the White House. I mean, I don't know if people remember this kind of stuff, right? Tab is breaking with Tom Joyner as a result of that. And Tavis Smiley getting his ass handed to him by Al Sharpton on Al Sharpton's radio show when Tavis does a harsh critique of Sharpton and the other activists in the snowstorm. And you can find this radio segment online where Sharpton not only tears Tavis' new asshole, but then says at the end of it, and this is important, this is pre MSNBC, he says, why do you have to be the one to call the meeting? Why do you have to be the one to moderate the discussion? Maybe we need to change that.
Clearly, we've been talking on this show and other forums about we need everybody to sit down. But I do not think that, Tavis, you can call everybody to sit down or the date you set up with a TV station without talking to people about their dates, and you have been notoriously anti the president. I think you ought to be on the panel, not convening the panel. I think some of the, wait a minute, let me finish. I think some of the objective people in our community that have not been pro or con the president or to convene this, and those of us that got a position should take it. And I think we ought to talk about a black agenda. I think Chicago's the right place to talk, and I don't think we should limit it to the president. Let's talk about the black politicians and black leaders in Chicago that are supporting.
And how do we change that? By Sharpton running the discussion, by Sharpton being the moderator, and that's how we get him on MSNBC.
Can you remind people what Tavis Smiley used to do? I remember it. I think people have kind of forgotten the yearly black conversation. Just very briefly.
Very briefly. Tavis Smiley was a brother who was a broadcaster. He came up as a self-promoter. He hooked up with Tom Joyner and started doing ridiculous commentaries in the 90s that nobody was paying attention to. But he became a millionaire as a result of his charisma and popularity. And because he became a millionaire, he then, as I always like to say, he confused being Larry King with Martin Luther King. He then started thinking that, okay, he was the dude that was going to be a black leader. So he started doing these huge meetings on C-SPAN because him and Brian Lamb were personal friends. So he started doing these 5-hour meetings, State of the Black Union on C-SPAN. He wrote his own black agenda. He said, I'll do the job of the Urban League. I'll write my own black agenda. He wrote his own black agenda. And he got to be a race traitor, to use your term. He got to be a race traitor when he asked Obama to come to one of those meetings and he refused. And he wanted to send Michelle instead. And instead of accepting Michelle, Tavis publicly attacked Obama for not yielding to him.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that began that whole thing.
Yeah.
And so you have Tavis and Cornel West in one corner, partly for policy, but partly they're aggrieved because Cornel West also campaigned for Obama and didn't feel he was given reciprocal behavior. So part of it is a personal agreement by two very egocentric men, but part of it is also we don't think you have Black America's goals at heart. And so Tavis Smiley and Cornel West become race traitors as a result of this. And it gets so bad that Michael Eric Dyson, and see, these three used to be a trio.
Oh, yeah, you're bringing me back,
Michael
man.
Eric Dyson writes a 20,000-word attack piece on Cornel West because of these arguments over Obama.
But wait, remember, don't forget there's an important part where, before that, where Dyson first complains that Obama didn't invite him to the White House.
Yeah, and there's
that was Cornel West. That was Dyson too?
No, Dyson did that too.
Yeah. And there's a clip of Dyson. There's a clip of Dyson at Tavis Smiley's State of Black America thing, I think in like 2012 or 11. And he says something like Obama is not Moses, he's Pharaoh.
You think Obama is Moses. He is not Moses. He's Pharaoh. You got to understand that Pharaoh, I'm not dogging him. I'm talking about his office. One man is a prophet, another man is a politician. It is time to say to Pharaoh, not let our people go, let our resources go. Let that money go. Let that love flow. I know white folk don't want you to love us, but you came from us. Before they knew you, we loved you. We birthed you. We gave you acceptance. You were biracial, but black folk made you a black man in America. Now represent us. Don't dog us when we need you.
Like I remember that.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember that.
And then
remember and Todd, I forgive me, I don't know, if I remember, you would coin the phrase "the Great Negro Bowl." That's what that was every year.
Yeah, we used to joke about it in my office. We called it the Negro Bowl, the Travis Smiley.
And I also just want to say, while I've interrupted, and again, appreciate this discussion, because I think it's important to document in terms of this history that one of the reasons, I think at least, that both Dr. Burroughs and I are no longer teaching in the School of Journalism at Morgan State is because we would have these discussions and debates openly in our offices and in the hallways and in our classrooms, since we had neighboring offices. And I think the reverberating discussions put pressure on folks and eventual leadership to the point where they felt like we need to break this up and get rid of both of them. So I just want to put that, I just, like we were, this is reminding me, like we would have, as I remember them, vigorous discussions and debates around Obama, what the black press and black media were doing or not doing. And so, yeah, so I, again, appreciate that this is getting some documentation. Go ahead, man.
So I want you to understand, the traitor thing is this emotional response to this history that very few people can recite, but it's been what's the word, phenomenological, what's the word, that the lived experience, Dr. Ball, intellectual word,
phenomenological. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. I don't think I'm saying that right.
The lived experience of black people, right? We know our history, but we can't really recite it. Like, we can't really do all these things that Dr. Ball and I do. We spend years of our lives reading and writing and all that, so we can do this, right? But for most of us, it's just an experience we've lived through. So when someone says to you, okay, now we're going to have an opportunity to do something new, instead of having a Richard Pryor skit from the Richard Pryor Show about being the president. I don't know if you know about that skit too, Black, but Richard Pryor had a fantastic TV show in the late 70s that NBC couldn't handle, where he did a wonderful skit about being the first black president.
Yes, ma'am.
Roberta Davies, Jet magazine. Mr. President, on your list of candidates for director of the FBI, are you including the name of Huey Newton?
Yes, I figured that Huey Newton is best qualified. He knows the ins and outs of the FBI, if anybody knows the ins and outs, and he would be an excellent director.
Yo, Blood. Yeah, Brother Bell from Ebony Magazine. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Assalamu alaikum.
All right. What you looking at, Snow White?
Just in terms of this history, that as a response to what Todd was just breaking down in terms of the covered in white snow, the Snow White Black Press Conference, in part of his response to that, I think it is important to note historically that this is when Glenn Ford and Omali Yeshitela put together the Black is Back Coalition, which was in part an attempt to, in 2009, say, we see what's happening here, and we see that what the attempt is with this presidency. We see what impact is beginning to have or already having in politicized Black spaces, and there needs to be a Black radical, anti-imperialist, internationalist response as loud as possible. And and to their credit, there was that attempt to do that. And one of the reasons, and I'll just leave it here for now, at least in terms of the Great Harlem Debate, that I think is important to note. One of the reasons why I think, going back to the initial question you were asking, that you saw Glenn's, I think, clarity, and then a lot of confusion on both sides, even anyway.
Yeah, even the nose arguments weren't all that. Yeah.
Exactly. A lot of the confusion was just, my note here is about standards of analysis. So, and the way I've tried over the years to make this point, that I think it is important to note that you had both Glenn Ford and Marimba Ani representing materialist and African-centered camps, nationalist camps, both in agreement condemning Obama, and both making more or less similar arguments pointing to policy, structure, and predicting accurately based on what was already known about the history of Obama and who he was selecting for his cabin, and what was going to happen. So whether folks are more materialist or not, I think either side, so to speak, have standards of analysis that can be risen to elevate everybody out of the morass that we're in. So I just wanted to attempt some point about that before we move on. But yeah,
I think I've made all my points. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I guess we hit a few already, so I don't have to go back through all of them. Let's see here. I guess we've talked about a little bit with Tavis and Cornell West, but what was the consequences? I'm sure this will be personal, but what was the consequences of being labeled a race traitor once Obama was elected and reaches his peak? What are the consequences that people that were on that side that held their ground or stood their ground? What was the consequences for people like that? Or
marginalization, omission, your name don't get met. Like just for me personally, I saw a number of the invitations to certain radio shows, certain at the time, that's what most of us, at least I was doing, radio shows, like they dried up. Invitations to certain meetings got canceled. Certain social settings canceled. And then because of my association at the time at a lower level with Black Agenda Report, I could just I would just bore witness to the hostility that a critique of Obama got, which for me crescendoed at being called during a call-in show at WPFW, like Black Radical DC Radio, and have a Black woman say she pulled over on the way to drive her daughter to school because I was playing Marimba Ani's at the time her comments from the Great Harlem Debate. And to have a Black audience member of WPFW call me to say, how dare you ruin my child's morning on the way to school playing this anti-Obama crap. Like I thought I couldn't believe it. But if folks go back, from the liberal halls of Congress, where the so-called justice, what was it, the progressive Democrats or the justice Democrats, where they were saying they couldn't get funding anymore for anything once Obama got elected because everybody assumed it was all good, down to the nonprofit communities were reporting similar concerns, to the more radical spaces where even people like, no disrespect, but Ikwe Arma was even saying that Obama was likely to lead the African world into a new state of well-being because of his mixture perfectly situating him to be able to make this. I mean, it was, we were unprepared. I think, again, we were just unprepared for what Obama, the impact as a psychological warfare or a psychic intrusion, as Laura talks about. So it was a very wild and upsetting time, like a lot of hostilities. That's at least how I remember it. Todd,
and could I mention why we were unprepared? People forget this point that I'm about to make. Because who was being groomed to be the first black president? It was not Barack Obama. Do you remember who I'm talking about, Dr. Ball?
No.
Colin Powell.
Oh, and I do remember when his wife on TV said he can't do it because he'll get shot.
Right. But it was Colin Powell that people thought were going to be the first black president. Colin Powell and his wife were on the cover of the 50th anniversary of Ebony. That's how big Colin Powell was.
That's right. Yeah.
And as Dr. Ball said, his wife told him in the bed that you don't know this cracker the way I do, they will kill you. You are not ready for president, right? But we wouldn't have gone through all of this stuff had Colin Powell been president, because Colin Powell had a record, right? He had a record in Nicaragua. He had a record as, he had a different record. We wouldn't have gone through a lot of this intellectual gymnastics that we went through with Obama.
I don't think he would have been able to win as a Democrat. He didn't have the presentation. He didn't have he would have, I think he would have had a better chance of winning as he would have been the first black Republican nominee. But because he had that record that you're talking about, from Me Lie to everything else. I mean, he was like,
he had a long rap sheet. Yeah.
Right.
But my Colin Powell story again, with on the USS John F. Kennedy, and me and his brother were, I don't know, painting or doing some menial labor, and Colin Powell came strolling through with his black lieutenants, or no, his white lieutenants carrying his, I'm sorry, it was a white lieutenant carrying his briefcase, and the brother next to me said, see, he got that white man carrying his briefcase. And I turned to him and I said, but we are still here. I was like, that don't mean shit. We're still right here. So even, in its early stages, the Colin Powell was showing me that there's a class consciousness that needs to be evolved. Anyway, I'm just. But that was a good point I think to remind us of. Colin Powell was, wow. Anyway, and then as Todd has talked about in the past as well, like there was this unofficial mandate that Todd, I don't know if you want to quickly tell this, but where black writers were essentially being told, we're not publishing you can't publish a book that doesn't end with some sort of positive reference to Obama and his impact.
I was told by a major black writer in 2009 that book publisher said any black nonfiction book you write has to end with Barack Obama's election.
Yeah.
So even like Merrill's book on Malcolm, I believe it ended on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I haven't done the work to confirm that, but it certainly felt like that, and there was certainly an encouragement in that time to fall in line, and not be, I remember Dyson said, give the brother a chance, like that was I had another brother on the panel tell me, and with sincerity, we're gonna be able to have cookouts on the White House lawn just as black people once he gets elected. Like people were really believing like a lot of nonsense, and it was aided by a very well put together campaign that is, as Dr. Burroughs has pointed out, extends back decades, before people were even aware of what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, we might have to do more of this later because I have so many more questions. But I guess one last question. I guess we talked earlier about policy, but I guess like why couldn't that criticism stick? I guess to kind of bring that question back, like why couldn't the criticisms of the policies, why couldn't they break through to most black people? It seemed at the time. Is it because of the things y'all already said, the media, everybody was yeah.
I'd like to go back to, again, Mary Baraka's essay on Jesse Jackson and black people, which I hope you link to, because when Baraka points out to Jesse all the concessions he's making, Jesse answers with more other concessions that the Democratic Party has made. So it's hard to make an argument when the people in charge of the party or your candidates brag about how great their power is to gain concessions from the Democrats. There's almost, if you're a pragmatic person, there's no answer to that. And that's the problem that we've had since Gary. And by the way, it was Ron Walters who told me that, Gary was important on a lot of levels. The one level was that they thought a governor was going to be president and that they would present that black agenda to him. Right?
By the way,
go ahead.
By the way, Ron Walters also, and I think is one of his last essay or articles, was pointing out that Obama had abandoned the black press by taking for granted that they would support him and not drop off that much needed campaign money that would often come. That was, my thing is that, I think it is important to point out that we were getting Obama after, of course, the crushing of Black Power, COINTELPRO, Reagan era politics, and the emergence of a beautifully designed counterinsurgent media environment. He's coming after Bill Cosby, and the Cosbys. Like, there's all this stuff that's happening, and so even before you get to it, just very rarely, unfortunately, do most people, black, white, or other, pay attention to policy and pay attention to the funding and the cabinet appointments and and honestly, it was only my association at the time with Black Agenda Report that I was that as well informed about it as I was. That it was like, and then I would be in those spaces and watch Glenn or others or even myself try to make these interventions and say, but are you paying attention to the fact that he's the most Wall Street funded, candidate in history of the presidency? Do you see who he's appointed? Did you see he's already abandoned my thing was the Employee Free Choice Act. I was like, he kept promising unionization, and he did. Did you see when Helen Thomas asked him at his first press conference a question about Israel, and he fell in line and confirmed for her, she would later confirm herself publicly, that he was not going to be any different on the issues involving the Middle East. Like when you would bring that stuff up, the response from all over the place, from not only just celebrities, of course, but all of the supposedly even left-leaning pundits, academics, activists, etc., all with a version of, got to give the brother a chance. We got to at least see what he could do. I don't care if he fails. Let's just have a black man in there. Like, it was like that whole kind of thing. It was like a complete abandonment. Again, I think, he had already launched it, but this is again why I think Glenn, when after leaving Black Commentators, they called it Black Agenda for a reason. That the Black agenda that was being promoted by the people that would make that snowy White House delivery is not real. It's not legitimate. It's not one that represents the aspirations that of a true liberated, Black community.
I want to also quickly say that Obama's become this template for a whole nother group of Black political leaders. In fact, Gwen Ifill wrote a whole book on this. I forgot what it's called, but Gwen Ifill wrote a whole book saying these are the new leaders that are coming in the Obama template. And to Black, I'm getting tired of being on YouTube. Jared will tell you I've been turning down more and more appearances on YouTube. But when Cory Booker runs for president, you will have me on here and I will give you the whole Cory Booker story. And if you think Obama's story is bad, see, they're all coming with the same kind of thing. And it's all trickery and it all works. Because the psychology of oppressed people, we're always willing to give anything a chance.
Right.
And it doesn't matter whether people fail us or not. Like, that literally doesn't matter if people fail us or not. It doesn't matter whether they publicly betray our principles. It doesn't matter because we're always afraid of the alternative.
Right. Which is what Glenn Ford used to say, the Republican Party is a white man's party. And that's often what we're voting against.
Yeah.
All right. if y'all have any last thoughts, again, there's a lot more we could get into, but definitely appreciate getting this on record.
I mean, I got 20 more minutes at least. I just wanted to make sure we got before this dude shows up and starts making all this noise.
I'm done, but I mean, if there's other things you want to talk about, if there's something I can add that's intelligent, I will. But if not, I'll listen to the two of you.
Yeah, I mean, we hit on much of the history, and I think what we were moving towards was more of the impact that it has on today, and how it has shaped. Like you talked about a Cory Booker or such, but it seems. Well, actually, I'm gonna go somewhere else because I think that one's a little easier. What are ways that people now retell this story? Because nobody will. All of this sounds embarrassing, even if you're not a radical. All of this still sounds embarrassing. Like even if you're like 25 years old listening to this probably all sounds really embarrassing. So, what are ways that people?
The number one. Hold up. Let me just do this real quick. Sorry, real quick, because I don't want to forget. The number one thing as I'm seeing it, I'm very glad you asked this. The number one thing that I'm seeing that they're doing that is being encouraged by Obama and his camp and the Democratic Party itself is that Obama was about to bring this revolution and was just held back by the Republican Party and some punk ass Democrats. Right. And it's as if he had the whole thing we brought up earlier about, telling people to make me do it. And it's like you're saying that after already being elected in one of the most popular, worldwide presidential elections ever. You have the first 2 years of your presidency with the Democratic Party dominating both houses of Congress. Theoretically, they could have passed anything, and they did nothing. They did absolutely nothing.
But let's talk about why. Because he decided that he only wanted one thing passed. And he put all his political capital in that, and that was health care. And remember, there were those Democratic conservatives that kept trying to stop him. And he kept compromising and it got so bad. I mean, Obama compromised so much. It got so bad in the healthcare debate, Nancy Pelosi had to go to him and say, no, we're not compromising anymore. You've got to stand up against these folks, right? Obama decided to do the most pragmatic thing, but see, here's where he messed up purposely, which goes to Jared's point. Obama, when he was running for president in 2008, there was this activist group. I forgot what it was called, but it was a Democratic activist group that all the progressives got on and everybody jumped on and they helped get him in office. And then the first thing he does is he dismantles that group. I forget what the group is called. Do you remember that?
But the way I remember it was he got rid of Tom Daschle, who was the only major Democrat who would have helped him pass, who wanted universal health care, something like that. So I really have to review, but
I remember, I remember the name of the group, but I can't remember the name of the group off the top of my head. I know what you're talking about in terms of he had a major apparatus.
Right.
That was where his community organizing actually.
Right. It was activist. Yeah. It was activist apparatus. It was a digital apparatus.
Yeah.
That he dismantled the moment he got in office.
And put it.
No, we don't need that anymore. We have the Democratic Party. Yeah. Because what he used to say was, I know you remember this, Dr. Ball. He used to say, "I'm the progressive in the room. I don't need a bunch of progressives in the room." Remember that? He said, "I'm the progressive in the room."
But the real point was he was never intending to do it. That's my point.
And that's what
the history that Glenn and Bruce and Margaret were really outlining that folks were not catching. And so this rebrand to come back today with the help of all of his Netflix and Disney nonsense is and his Audible series on Reconstruction, which is just super diabolical with Malcolm Gladwell. That thing is some nonsense.
Malcolm Gladwell is a whole
elite level nonsense. And by the way, his Hulu thing with Larry David, don't let the comedic thing it's intended to be fooling. He's doing this. It's an entire rebrand of the history of this country, of his own history, and the point being that when people look back and look carefully enough to see Black people in particular, but nobody really got shit except the rich, then the rebrand will be in place. he did the best he could. It's them damn Republicans, man, and them the Democrat, and then this whole idea that even as president of the United States, you're somehow still incapable without being pushed to do things that you ran, at least alluding to, saying that you would do. So I mean, that's my thing.
Said black people became experts on what presidents couldn't do under Obama, right? That was always the dialogue, what he couldn't do. And we now have seen what you can do when you're president, right? And the real tragedy here is that because we've now gone through these 6 years, about to be 8, Obama is going to be looked at as some sort of golden era.
Yeah.
Where everybody was kind, everybody was nice. Like, for instance, Obama had one of the worst records of dealing with the press in recent presidencies. People forget that. There were whole studies on this, on how bad the Obama administration was with the press, how bad the Obama administration was in several things.
On whistleblowers, you know, he, in terms of just the press, he was terrible in condemning and protecting whistleblowers. He got rated as a D in terms of his support for HBCUs. Like all of these things, like he got rated for a D in terms of the post-Katrina rebuild project in terms of his support for that, which people forget about as well. Like there's so many things that he gets away with simply because of this fantastical image that has been cultivated not unskillfully, like to their credit, you know.
And again, we have to look at the alternative every day. And so Obama looks better and better when we look at, you know, what the last, you know, 6 interrupted years, you know, but you know, the 6 years I mean, in comparison. And so then he even goes higher on a pedestal because that was back when the presidency was a respectful institution.
Yeah. He could. I was watching interviews of him, old interviews and new ones, to prepare for this, just to remind, because I usually never want to listen to Obama, but just to remind myself how skillful he was. And yeah, if you watch that and then if you don't, again, putting policy and everything aside, if you watch Obama speak and then you watch Trump speak, I understand if there's nothing else to compare. I understand why people feel like that was a golden era. You know what I'm saying? If they were not talking about anything that they actually did and just listening to them speak, it's pretty obviously, you know, one over the other. Because I mean, I was watching Obama he's doing this podcast run because of the Presidential Center up in Chicago. So now he's been doing interviews. I mean, he did that thing where he said George Washington was a genius and a great guy, even if he was a slave owner or whatever. But and I think that's the thing. That's the Obama that younger people are being introduced to, which I think they look at with a little more skepticism than people who are my age or even obviously older, who like were there to vote for him or whatever, even if we were very young. But he was doing these podcasts on these sports podcasts, which is a new way to slide through a lot of propaganda.
Oh man, that All the Smoke interview was crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And he was on the Pivot as well, and I was just watching.
Oh wow.
He's so skillful. Like he walked in the room and he's like, y'all know y'all have questions for me, but I got questions for you. And he starts complimenting everybody in the room. And you know, he was talking to Ryan, what's his name? He on the Pivot. I can't remember his last name, but he was like, he's like, I saw you this morning. Are you a twin? Are you the same person? Because he's like complimenting him for how hard he's working. And then the kind of like comedy relief on the show asked him like, man, you got women coming at you all the time? And he's like, well, you know, I gotta remember my wife, and you know, I was famous later in life. Like, you know, like he's just so good at it. I have to give him credit. Like, you know, and after listening to someone like Trump speak, it elevates it even more, because it's like someone lets a little light in a very dark room, you know, if we're just talking about speaking.
No, I mean,
yeah.
Again, like I was trying to think of a joke. It's like the difference between, I was like, you know, would you rather be, you know, getting it's like the difference between getting abused by Hannibal Lecter or Larry the Cable Guy. Like it's all going to be bad, but somebody's just got fine wine and can quote Shakespeare and some shit, you know. The other ones, you know, said, you know, I don't know. Anyway, it's a terrible analogy, but the point is that's he was very good, and he was groomed for a very long time and prepared, and he's no dummy. And now he's not in office. So like all ex-presidents, he can say things and behave in ways and make false promises in ways that he couldn't do when in office. So it's even almost more and more diabolical given
And what's more
Yeah.
dangerous is that he
opposite.
now is on the Black Mount Rushmore, the invisible Black Mount Rushmore
Yeah.
that says we start with, that first slave that rebelled when it came to the shore, and we go all the way up through Martin and Malcolm and all that, and now we have in Mandela, right? And now we have an O with all these M's. Now we have an O, right? Right, Obama, right? So this is the next. That's the next chapter. Which again, that was his plan. At 30,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be the next chapter of this thing, and he got there.
Yeah, and that's how they talk to him. That's how all those from like Dr. Ball was talking about on all the smoke. I mean, they look up to him, and I think he's doing a clear like consolidation. That whole kind of bracket of black. I mean, Jay-Z's doing the same thing with these, with these concerts that he just did. They're now because now the thing is nostalgia, and they're really pulling on the nostalgic heartstrings. But nostalgia is never really what happened. So nostalgia is like a myth of what happened, right? So now they're pulling on all the nostalgia, and they're kind of going at the criticisms that they know have existed out there. Jay-Z's not as skilled as Obama, so he's kind of embarrassing himself a little bit with the freestyles. But Obama doing this, because I'm like, why is Obama speaking on George Washington one way or another? I don't even know why these quotes are coming up, but he's going on this tour to also kind of like push back against this new sense of history that people have, where they look at America as a colonizing entity as it is. But he's like, yes, another one he's like, yes, that's true. It was built on all these things. Like, he acknowledges it, but it still is an idea. It's a promise. It's all these wonderful things, right? Like, he's still,
That goes all the way back to the race speech.
yeah.
Same thing.
I mean, he's
Same thing.
consistent. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. No, that's no, we in some trouble. And that, that point, I would just want to just reiterate again that point about what happened at the Great Harlem Debate reverberates today. Like the struggles we're having with analysis and organizing around it is still here. It was a little bit sad, actually, to go back and listen to it and be reminded of how many people are not even here anymore. And how little I think has changed in terms of our preparation for what's next. But yeah.
Yeah, that was last point. That was sad because the arguments were the same, damn near. I mean, a black family, like representation. And I have maybe a small bit of sympathy because some of those things had not been tried to the scale that they have been tried since then. So it's more embarrassing today to still hear those arguments regurgitated because, we were talking about how this was a setup, but like black people were more relegated to kind of a corner of the market, even in media, that has changed since then. We still are, but I'm saying there's a lot more integration and, black faces in high places than there was back then. And we've lived through this, and we've seen like the failures of it and felt and lived, and still you have people throwing those arguments out there. I don't think they stick as well as they used to, but they still have a gravity to them, even if they.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I would want to. I'd be interested to hear you now or later say more about that, because where I definitely feel naive looking back is that I did at the time believe in '08 for sure. Maybe less so in 12, but I felt in '08 for sure, like at least after all of this, we're going to come out, better prepared analytically to not fall for this anymore. that once, because I knew what was going to happen at that point. It was pretty clear. So by the 8 years later, I was like, now we have 8 years of all this evidence. But I was naive at the ability for in real time, and certainly looking back, for them to rebrand what was happening as to make it not ever his fault, not the fault of the Democratic Party, not and then to ultimately be able to bring us back where they could recapture a lot of folks who had been tricked by Obama with Bernie. And we'll see. So anyway, I hope.
I think if Obama had been followed by Biden, we would have had a much more chance to have a much more objective view.
Yeah, I agree.
Of Obama,
but even Hillary, I think, would have
provided
your vote. Yeah,
right. But it's the fact that Obama got replaced by Trump, and Trump comes in with all that white nationalism, and that movement has been building for 50 years and all that. And you can watch the PBS Frontline series from Obama to Trump, where they go into the whole right-wing thing and how that grew for 30, 40 years. So then Trump comes. See, the ironic thing that's happening here is that Obama is being portrayed as the end result of 50 years of struggle or 100 years of struggle, whatever, and he's not. Trump is the result of 50 to 100 years of struggle, but it was only because he decided to sign on to the Republican agenda back in 2015. Because I remember when all the Republican magazines and everything attacked Trump, right? Said he was going to be the worst thing, he was going to destroy the party and all that. But he hadn't met with them yet. He didn't cut a deal with them. And once that deal got cut, which is what we got now, and everybody got their appointments in and all that, and we got this fulfillment of 50 years of right-wing dreaming. So the Powell memo is now made flesh, right? All of that has been fed into this whole thing, right? With the contract with America and the whole thing. I mean, all of that's been fed in. And so now we have a radical party that got an election with a radical and implemented a radical agenda, but it's just not ours.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good way to close it, because that was definitely a culmination of real organizing versus Obama was the counter to any organizing on the so-called left side of things.
It was weird. Like, it was, I remember thinking I had a bar. I thought I had a real good talking point at the time when I would say to people like, but you had never in activist spaces who were wanting us to vote for him and saying, but you never heard of him before. Like that, shouldn't that? I thought that would have been enough, and I thought I had a whole bar and everything. I thought I was walking into the room with the pun intended Trump card, and it was wrong. Like, I was like, doesn't the fact that none of you have ever heard of him before mean anything to you?
In those spaces, specifically.
In those spaces, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And it didn't hit. I was like, so yeah, that's. But man, so thank you, man. Thank you very much. And Todd, thanks for dragging yourself to the microphone.
No, thank you. Yes, because that's what I did. That's exactly what happened. And to Black, thank you for having this discussion. There's so much stuff that I now realize people are just not going to read. They're not going to go research. They're not going to go, read all these magazines and all these old things that made all these arguments and websites and all. They're just not going to be reading this stuff. So what you did here, I think, was very valuable, and I appreciate that you allowed me to remember the little bit I could.
No, I definitely appreciate it. And yeah, maybe we can do another one on this. We'll have to probably focus on a more specific period. Like, we kind of did an overview. Maybe we come back and talk about what the healthcare battle was, or some of these other like more specific moments, and give more prep time for that, so we can go over it. Because I think,
and we also got to remember that Aaron Magruder also had some clarity. That episode.
Oh man, season 3, episode 1 is as good a media analysis of Obama as I can remember.
Dick riding for
yeah,
Obama.
but that part too, but especially the part where the grandfather's talking to the documentarian and he said, "What is Obama going to do for you?" And he's like, "He's going to get us out of the war." And he's like, "Nah," he said, "He's going to extend the war. He's going to get us health care." Now he said he's not going to do. Then he's like, "What the nigga going to do?" It was like, that's the point.
I'm voting for Obama because he's going to lower my taxes.
Actually, he has promised to raise taxes at your income level.
Huh?
And he's just really, really fit to lead. And also body fit, too.
Well, I also support Obama because he's against corporate bailouts.
That is also not true.
Huh?
I'm supporting Obama because he's black.
And he's going to get the troops out of Afghanistan, right?
Also wrong.
Then what the fuck that nigga gonna do?
God damn it. That's the point. Man, salute, man. Man, somebody find Aaron Magruder, man.
Yeah, that was, and he got killed for that.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then that speech he gave where he what was the speech where he talked shit about Condoleezza Rice too? He did something and they said, man, he's gonna have to they ran him to retirement. They ran him to retirement anyway.
Yeah, he got killed for that episode. And that was the last season. I mean, that fourth season
was the last season he did.
Yeah, that fourth season wasn't his.
That was the last season he did, right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, folks. I really appreciate it. And I'm munching out here. I did this now.
Yeah, good. See? Don't be so difficult next time.
You were right, Dr. Ball. It was a good thing I did this. Thank you. Yeah. And thank you to Black again.
Hey, my guy's here. I'm gonna have to jump.
Go.
Peace, fellas. Thank you very much.
Go now too.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, y'all.
Barack Obama.
Got up this morning, things weren't working right. I said I wanna make a change. I said I wanna fight. Obama walked up and said, yes, we can. I said I wanna ride your nuts, cause I think you're the man. Now I'm dick riding. Obama, Obama. Now I'm dick riding. Obama, Obama. Now I'm dick riding. Obama, Obama. Now I'm dick riding.
Dick riding for tomorrow. Dick riding for today. Dick riding for the straight. Dick riding for the gay. Dick riding for America. Dick riding for Iraq. It's okay to ride that dick just as long as it's Barack.